In an interview before his death, John Lennon said he was really hurt by you, that you'd never mentioned in your autobiography any of the influence that he had on you. I'd like to know where you were when John Lennon died.
I was in bed.
Yeah, I was in bed at the time in England, and I don't know, the call came through sometime in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning. I didn't take the call. Olivia took the call, and she said, John's been shot. And I thought, oh, how bad is it? You know, I just thought maybe a flesh wound or something like that. Well, I thought at first maybe he just got wounded, you know. And, you know, it was hard to accept or to believe. But they said, no, that's it, he's dead. So I didn't know. I just went back to sleep, actually. I just, maybe it's just a way of getting away from it. I just went to sleep and then waited to see, you know, what it said the next morning. And he was still dead the next morning, unfortunately. Oh. You know, it's no different really to anybody having news about anybody they know. You know, the shock. I'm sure a lot of people were just as shocked as I was about John Lennon, or about, I mean, your Prime Minister for that matter. You know, it's all nasty business when people get shot.
It's like losing your parents or anybody you know and love. You know, all things must pass. But when it's taken in a violent way like that by somebody else, you know, it makes it very strange.
It was, I mean, obviously such a shock, because assassination is something which, you know, up until that time hadn't really got down to that level. I mean, it was always presidents and leaders like that. But, you know, I feel not so bad about it, in as much as, you know, I had this, you know, unlike Ringo, when I went to Rishikesh in India, I went into meditation and had some good experiences. And I believe what it says in the scriptures and in the Bhagavad Gita. It says there was never a time when you didn't exist, and there'll never be a time when you cease to exist. The only thing that changes is our bodily condition. Soul comes in the body and we go from birth to death, and it's death. How I look at it is like taking your suit off. You know, the soul is in these 3 bodies and one body falls off. And I feel like that. I can feel him around here. And I wouldn't think, you know, somebody who's a pop star was important enough to kill. You know, it's a terrible thing. I don't think anybody is important enough to kill, you know, really. And, but I could see why, you know, those assassinations with political leaders and stuff, just extremist. And obviously, if it could happen to him, it could happen to anybody, you know, who gets up on a stage or who walks out of a car. And, you know, so it was a bit scary from that side.
For a while afterwards, George was extremely concerned about his own safety. Because, I mean, there are plenty of cranks out there who think, you know, a carbon copy shooting, maybe even get 2 or 3 of them now, you know. All those nasty things which you sort of laughed at before Lennon's death suddenly must have become rather more serious. And I think it was a bit more difficult to get in to see George for a while after that.
What did that do to your head? I mean, did it mean that you closed the doors even more?
Not really. I was already trying to live a, you know, try and hold on to some sort of privacy. I think everybody needs to have a bit of space, you know. I mean, if you were just being mobbed and on TV and that all your life, you know, you just turn into a loony. And long before he got shot, I was already just, digging in the garden, planting trees and just trying to not go on television, just have a bit of peace. But what it did was, I think it affected me just probably like anybody who loved him and who, grew up with him or with his music. And, it was a very sad thing, and it didn't really make me feel, it made me wonder about ever getting in situations where there's, fans. Although at the same time, you can't blame fans for that. There's one loony in every crowd, I suppose. Everybody likes to say, okay, one of your best friends got assassinated, so surely you must be nervous about being assassinated too. I like to take care, but I don't walk around fearing for my life, and I don't think, anybody could be bothered killing me. What's the point of killing me? You can't go around worrying. I think of it like, say, a plane crash. A friend of mine was terrified of flying, and in the end he decided to go to a psychiatrist, and instead of the psychiatrist saying to him the sort of thing you would expect, he said to him, it doesn't matter if you crash, you're not important. Which is true, really. It's like it's an ego thing of, I am going to crash. Me, I'm so important that I'm going to crash. But really, that's another way of looking at it. You're not that important, don't worry, it's... And the same thing goes for that, for assassination. I would like to think, I'm not that important.
Do you remember the last time you saw him?
Yeah, I was in New York at his house. Yeah, he was nice. He was, just sort of running around the house making dinner, and he was actually playing a lot of Indian music, which surprised me because he always used to, be a bit like me, like that when I was always playing it.
In an interview before his death, John Lennon said he was really hurt by you, that you'd never mentioned in your autobiography any of the influence that he had on you.
He was annoyed because I didn't say that he had written one line of the song Taxman. But
did you tell him that?
Well, I didn't, because he was already dead after that. But the point to that was that I also didn't say how I wrote 2 lines to Come Together or 3 lines to Eleanor Rigby. I wasn't getting into any of that. I think in the balance, I would have had more things to be niggled with him about than he would have with me.
But afterwards you say that it hasn't really changed your life. Or
well, it hasn't, because if we'd have still been in a working relationship, it would have changed it more. The thing is, I hadn't seen him for so long. For all I know, he could still be there now, because I didn't see him for 2 years anyway. And occasionally maybe he'd send a postcard. And it's knowing that he's on the other end of a telephone if you do on a call. That's the difference. Now, you need the big cosmic telephone to speak to him,
But he said that you idolized him as a young boy, that you thought...
Well, that's what he thought.
And you didn't?
Well, I liked him very much. He was a groove. He was a good lad, but at the same time, he misread me. He didn't realize who I was. And this was one of the main faults of John and Paul. They were so busy being John and Paul, they failed to realize who else was around at the time. We had a lot of experiences. I know John was, he knew who he was, that he was a soul that happened to be in this body for this period of time. And, I don't think, it's just the method by which you die, It's a sad thing, the way he died. And, it's okay that, it's okay really, for anybody. Everybody loses people. And, I'd just like to say that actually it's only the physical thing that disappears. The soul keeps on going. I think it's nicer if you can consciously leave your body at death as opposed to just some lunatic shooting you on the street or having a plane crash, something like that. I think it's unfortunate the way he went out, but it doesn't really matter. He's okay, and life flows on within you and without you. I believe in, I just believe in you know, that life goes on, you know. And so to me, I can't get sad. I'm sad by, you know, I can't go and have a play guitars with John. But then I did that anyway. I did that for, you know, a long time. He was very good. He was very good, and he was, in some ways, he was a slight genius. I mean, but apart from that, he was still just some guy like the rest of everybody else.
He was no angel.
He wasn't, but he was as well.
Was he?
Yeah.
George, you wrote a beautiful song after John Lennon died all those years ago, and one of the couplets in it, you wrote, "Living with good and bad, I always looked up to you," unquote. How did he influence, John influence you, and how did you influence him, do you think, through the years?
You know, we grew up together. We, from the age of about, maybe I was about 13 when I first met him. He was a tough guy, you know. He wanted to do something different, and likewise so did I and Paul. And so we gained strength from each other, really, like that. He was always the noisy one, or the, you know, the cheeky one, the pushy one. He'd be a bit more outspoken than the others. And at the same time, I think that was important. You know, we had all those elements, John being, you know, a bit upmarket with the intellectuals, and Paul being cute, and, you know, Ringo being cuddly, and I was the quiet one. So, I mean, it all sort of worked out, but it's strange, but it's just another one of the strange things that's happened in this life. You know, our manager died, our road manager was shot by the LA police. So many of our friends died through the years, and, you know, everybody went on drugs, everybody went to the Himalayas, everybody got divorced. You know, it's just a very concentrated kind of life. It's all right. The whole thing has been like this, really, in one way or another. It's all right.